presents Exposing the Secret. Introducing innovators, disruptors, and those intending to make a difference. You'll hear from companies and CEOs explaining how they're changing the competitive landscape. You'll hear their compelling stories. Pros from publicly traded companies in biotech, consumer, financial, and the tech landscape. This is Exposing the Secret. Let's do this.
Hello and welcome into Exposing the Secret. My name is Jay McFarland, and today I'm very excited to introduce you to Hil Davis. He's the CEO of Digital Brands Group. Now, Digital Brands Group creates personalized looks for customers based on their style preference using a portfolio of popular brands instead of just one single brand. Now, this allows their stylists to create customized looks from head to toe, resulting in increased revenue growth that leverages operating costs and generates significant cash flow. All right, Hil, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today. Do us a favor, tell us a little bit about Digital Brands Group and what you guys do, what makes you different.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So I think what's interesting about us is there are kind of two types of retail companies. There's the standalone brand, whether that's direct to consumer or wholesale, and then there's the portfolio company. Examples of that are like VF Corp, which owns everything from Vans to North Face, brands like that, to Tapestry, which is Coach, Kate Spade, et cetera. And where we are a little bit different is we kind of took an approach where we're what we call ourselves a modern portfolio company, because all these portfolio companies, they're run separate entities. It's just a sum of the parts of the revenue, and there's no integration. They'll say there's some back end and accounting, things like that. We're actually integrating on the front end, on the marketing side. And we realize, as an example, most customers are wearing different brands from head to foot. It's rare that you find one customer wearing the same brand from head to toe. And yet, if you're a portfolio company, or if you get emails, whether it's an individual brand or for a flow company, it's only for that brand. So that's why the department stores, even though they're having issues, they're too big, too many, they're still the largest percentage of revenue generated in apparel. And that's because you go there and you can shop multiple brands, and whether someone helps you create looks or you create your own, that's how it works. And that's what we're doing. We're basically doing that for the customer, except we own the brands as well. And I think that's so basically what we're saying is, here's how customers shop and buy and actually wear clothes. And here's how brands serve it up, which is completely different than how the customer does it. So why don't we actually build a portfolio company that we can take a single pair of denim in a wash and make it look like a streetwear product, make it look like athleisure, make it look like prep, make it look like tailored, so we can customize and personalize looks. And the more data we get from you based on what you like, whether it's your buying pattern and your history or what you're looking at, or whether it's the quiz you fill out that we're about to launch, the nice thing is we can now be that personal stylist and the brands. Where usually the personal stylist was at the store level, here it can be either most likely digital for us, but we can really create personalized looks and styles based on your style preference. And I think that's really powerful, as opposed to here's the brand and you're supposed to wear it from head to foot, which just doesn't happen.
Right. I think it's fascinating. I think we've seen that kind of trend happening with a lot of things. Like with the cable companies, you used to get all your channels in one, and then we said, oh, we're going to cut the cord, and now we're doing this a la carte thing, and then pretty soon we're like, man, I wish there was a way to bring this all together again. And I think we're kind of seeing that on the internet. It's been such an amazing place for individual brands to find a space and be direct to consumer and not have to have the brick and mortar. But they lose a lot of the power that comes from being associated or being in that brick and mortar store, right? They don't have the same purchasing power. They don't have the same marketing power, all of those things. So I think this model has got to be just an awesome way to go for both the consumer and the different brands that you represent.
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting is I did equity research for a decade. So I covered publicly traded stocks, retail, luxury goods, restaurants, and Amazon, Jeff Bezos, has always struggled with apparel. Even today, when you look at where they do well in apparel, it's commodity, it's gold toe socks, it's Hanes tees. It's like you can buy an iPhone. Well, if you buy this iPhone 13, you know what you're getting. If you buy a Tom Clancy book or a Harry Potter book, there's no question about what it is. You buy this Henley and it's black. Is it charcoal? Is it dark black? Like the shirt you're wearing, what's the check look like? How does the fabric feel? How does it fit? So what's really interesting is apparel, especially, doesn't set up well for customer acquisition. It sets up really well for customer retention once you know and trust the brand. And if you really think about the internet, it's no different than the catalogs of the J. Crews and everything else back in the 70s and 80s. It's basically, that's why they opened all the stores, because they realized that, someone can see a catalog and they see a pair of chinos or a button down and they're like, well, do I buy it, not buy it? JGO was a catalog company, all these, and then they move into stores and their sales go boom because you acquire the customer in the physical, to your point, and you retain them in the digital. And everyone in this world talks about omni-channel. It's irrelevant. That's like saying you got to ante up at the poker table. If you're going to play poker, you got to put an ante, right? The question is how are you playing the cards? And everyone talks about omni. It's not about omni. It's where do you acquire and where do you retain? You acquire, our belief in apparel is in the physical, and then you create this massive personalization and customization engine where we're serving you up personalized styles and looks on the digital side. So now that you know that our stateside brand feels and looks like this, our distilled brand feels and looks like this, our Harper & Jones brands feels and looks like this. We're making some acquisitions, Sundry and potentially Mount Khaki and a couple others. Those feel and look like this, right? All of a sudden now this becomes really powerful because we create these looks and you're like, oh, I know that Sundry brand. I know that Stateside brand. I know that Distilled brand. I know that Bailey. And you don't mind buying, especially if it's served up in a look that you would wear. And we think that's really the key. Is everyone's looking at it as omni. We're saying, no, it's where you acquire and where you retain. And those create different marketing purposes. Those create different presentation purposes and different, basically, strategies.
Right. And whereas before, each one of those brands would have to go through that process in and of itself, right? And it's one of the things that has been, for me personally, I think, am I going to buy clothes online in general? Because are they going to fit? Do I know what kind of quality they are? And do I have to build that relationship of trust with every single brand? That's a difficult proposition, right?
That's right. And especially with so many brands now launching, because it's a lot easier to launch a brand today than it was 10 years ago. You got AWS, you've got companies that help you with the sourcing. So it's easy. And there's so many brands that are sub 3 and 4 million, what we call sub revenue scale, that it really has an impact because they can launch. But then how do you go from 3 million in burning capital to 50 million in cash flow positive, 100 million and significantly cash flow positive? Because that's a very different cost and a very different strategic way to go. So you have all these little brands littering that are nipping and taking share, but it's harder and harder. And that's why return rates are so high in this industry with its direct.
Yeah, and we're just kind of building trust. How did the pandemic push this forward for you, though? It had to have had a huge impact as we couldn't go out. We couldn't go to other places. We had to try and experiment and take chances online.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had some pros and cons out of it. So the cons is we just purchased a brand called Bailey 44, which was principally wholesale, and we got whack-a-moled. I mean, we got crushed because the department stores closed and we just changed designers. And so we didn't bring on the new designer because we didn't know when stores were going to open back up. So we missed a year of revenue just because we didn't have product because we had no designer, waiting for COVID to really unwind itself. Because even when you bring on the designer, it still takes them a while to basically build the designs and then sell into wholesale. But where it helped us twofold, and these are both longer term trends, the biggest being that it pulled forward the online purchase and the belief in it, right? It's kind of like I remember my ex-wife when she'd go to the grocery store and bring back paper towels and toilet paper and water and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden she's like, wait, why am I just not ordering this on Amazon or through Whole Foods and getting it delivered? And once she tried it 2 or 3 times and she trusted it, she never went back to the grocery store to get that. And I feel like that is what happened during the pandemic. You had out of the 100 users that said they'd never buy online, all of them had to go buy online. right? And
Right.
so of those, a third to a half are like, okay, I'm now hooked. And some percentage will be, if not a majority, there's probably a quarter that said, that's great, I'm never going to do it again, or I'm going to do it very slow, and then or very lightly. And then the other quarter were like, okay, it'll be a mix. But you took 100 customers who are an absolute no, and 50 of them are now yeses, and 25 are a mix, and maybe 25 go back to a no. But that's 75% of a population that wasn't doing it now doing it. I just feel like that's very similar what happened with Amazon and ordering all those different things, especially household goods, where once you kind of break through that tipping point, it really takes off. So that's number one. And then number two was that we found that it had created this massive acquisition pipeline for us, because you kind of have three types of companies in terms of financial structure. One is they're VC or PE backed, right? The VC backed tend to be direct to consumer, and they realize that there's no way they're going to get that 10x anymore return. So they are putting those brands up for sale, because even though DTC was working really well, it was also costing a lot of money to acquire the customers. Then you have the PE backed ones, which are predominantly wholesale brands. Well, their model just got crushed, right? And it's not coming back. Like, wholesale will continue to shrink. So now they're going, okay, we got to sell this thing and just get our money back, because there's no way we're getting a higher ROI than we are today. And then the second group was like the founder based, where old school Garmentos, where whether they were designers or just they came out of the industry and they started their own brands, they realized that they were all wholesale type brands. So they always relied on the Nordstroms and the Neiman's and the Macy's. And they realized that they have to put this massive investment in digital, and they don't want to do it, because they're like, you know what? I'm making 15 to 20% a year. I'm taking home a couple $1 million after I take my dividend out of the company. And I have no desire to take that money and drop it back into digital, because I have no idea what I'm doing.
Right.
So what's interesting is it created this massive top of funnel acquisition opportunity, which now we're seeing magnified by the new privacy laws as well, because if you're acquiring customers online has become so expensive and so long because all these new privacy laws. So we're seeing some major tailwinds to our acquisition pipeline that are really helping that piece of it grow.
That's fascinating. I was going to ask you about privacy. For anybody who isn't aware, especially folks like Apple are making it much more difficult to know our habits. And I've got to tell you, I'm mixed, because I love it when a website knows what I want. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, that's kind of gross. They know what I want. You know, I'm kind of mixed. Like, I want my privacy, but man, I also like them to know and recommend things, because when they recommend things that I don't want, I'm like, come on, don't you know me by now? You know, so I have this conflict as a consumer, and I know it's impacting you as a business to try and offer that level of service.
It is. I think that's where we think, when you peel it back, that e-commerce should have been all about personalization. Stitch Fix has probably gotten it the closest to being right, but they've created like 8 style cohorts, and then you fall into one of those 8. So 5 million people, 3 million people, whatever it is, 2 million in 8 style cohorts. Mm-hmm. That's probably not accurate, right? It's way more variant than that. And that's where we think the promise of e-commerce, or what we'll call e-commerce 3.0, is that opportunity is to really own that personalization piece. And that's where we think we separate ourselves, because our belief is, if you build truly personalized content by having multiple brands and styling those brands to your style preference, you're going to be sticky. So, but that's probably through email and us getting to know you better than it is through digital ads for that reason. Mm-hmm. But also when you come to the site, we're going to be shooting all these different ways that we know your IP address. So when you're looking at, like, even this Henley or this shirt, it should be styled to the way you look, the way you prefer to dress. So we might shoot it 7 different ways, and when your IP address comes up, it serves up what they call the PDP images, which are the carousel shots when you see right on the thing that are tailored toward that way you would wear it. That's what's been missing in e-commerce, and part of it is because if you're a single brand, what different, you can't style it that way anyway, right? If you're these traditional portfolio holding companies, the brands aren't allowed to work together. I mean,
Right.
our CMO came over from Tapestry, and she was head of North America marketing at Coach, and she almost got fired for giving one of their brands customer email addresses that were no longer relevant to that weren't buying at Coach, because they were like, "You're stealing revenue from Coach," and it's like, wait, you should be helping each other. And by the way, those customers hadn't purchased in 18 months. So it's lost revenue. It's not lost revenue, right? And so but that's the issue. The comp plans are made to be, it's about my brand, my performance, not the portfolio performance.
Interesting. Now, why do you think no one has tried to do this the way that you're doing this? You guys are kind of pioneering in this way.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just we got lucky on timing. I think wholesale was always predominant. It's not like we're the smartest kids in the room. I think it's just one of those things where, wholesale started to break. And then I think direct to consumer started to break. Everyone thought back direct to consumer was going to take over the world. And then they've learned they haven't. Now you're seeing like Warby's and Allbirds, which both went public. They have like over 100 stores each, or going to that direction and claiming that's where they're going to be. Well, that's a very different message than we're a digital only company, which is how they originated. And it goes back to that acquisition type of model. They found that it's better to acquire a customer in the physical than it was in the digital, because also in the physical, they get to see, touch, and know your brand. They're more loyal, higher repeat rate, higher average spend. And this is across all brands that publish that. It's pretty crazy how consistent it is. And so I think everyone just kind of thought brand. And I think, given my equity research background, I think that helped a lot, because I saw all these different companies. I got to sit down with all these different executives. And so a combination of timing got lucky, wholesale models broken, direct consumer model broken. So you got to step back, and all this just kind of happened over the last 3 or 4 years, and say, okay, given that neither model works, how do you build a new model? So I think a lot of it was timing. And then a lot of it was just probably me not coming out of the industry, either wholesale or direct, and coming from a finance point of view. And then I'd started a company called J. Hilburn, which is men's custom clothing. We went from 0 to 55 million in 6 years, venture capital backed. So I kind of had that experience. But even when I went into custom, I took a very different approach. And that's why we scaled so fast, which is we're going to own the fabrics. We're not going to buy from a third party. So by the time I left, we were doing 100,000 custom shirts a month. And I mean, pure custom. So imagine ordering a Chevy Tahoe, and you get to pick your roof size, your roof color, your door size, your door color. Like, that's insane, right? And then it was landing at your door within 8 days of when you ordered it.
Amazing.
That's custom, pure custom.
Yeah, amazing.
But you kind of got to take and say, how would I do it differently? And I think that's one of the things we always do, is think about, how do you do it differently? Like, why is it broken, and what's the solve? And I think, I was fortunate. I got to cover Jeff Bezos. I got to cover Howard Schultz. I got to cover a bunch of Phil Knight, all these great executives, right? And you realize that's one of the things they constantly did, was challenge themselves internally. Why, we don't just stick with one model and grow. We constantly evolve. And I think a lot of times, especially in apparel and retail, it's old school, and it's like, well, this is how it's been done. And it's like, no.
Yeah, everybody's got to kind of adjust and evolve, right? And with that in mind, with what you're doing, you guys are drawing some attention. Are there other companies now looking at your model and saying, hey, we're going to go down that path?
Yeah, there are actually. There's this brand that went public called Solo Brands, and they traded about 5 times revenue. It's one of our comps. And it's pretty interesting. They're a little bit of a different mix. They kind of went an outdoor versus so they were like a stand-up paddleboard, a stove, and then a Chubby's, which is like a short company. And where we're looking at it more of like, an apparel, then we'll expand into home, and then we'll expand into beauty, or whatever order that may be. And that way we can cross-sell. I think it's harder to cross-sell those, but they very specifically said we're going to target that demographic. So that makes sense. And then there's a brand called AKA Brands that went public. I think they're 3.5 times revenue, and they're also a comp. They're more fast fashion, so their margins are lower, but they're owning all these fast fashion brands and selling those. And I think probably where we separate ourselves a little bit different is that we are truly cross-merchandising. And though they're not necessarily cross-merchandising, they're just trying to get more synergies from acquiring the different companies. And we really believe the holy grail is you're going to get personalized content based on how you style across the brands that we know you like. And then also the big issue in apparel right now is always sell, right? 50% off, 30% off, 20% off. We're going to try to get out of that cycle, and we're going to say they're going to do it two ways. One is that we're going to do what the beauty industry did, which is gift with purchase. So you buy this top, you're going to get a free pair of let's call it bottoms from a brand like Mountain Khaki if we acquire them, right? Which we think will happen. So now we can move you from one brand to the other based on, we know that you might be a Mountain Khaki customer, we know you might be a Sundry customer, whatever it may be. So we can specify the GWP, but your value is really high because you're getting a free product. Our cost is not that high. So we are able to arb that. And instead of doing 20% off and putting the brand on sale and training that way, we actually help hop you from brand to brand to brand. And that lowers our customer acquisition cost to less than like $15, where you're paying $100 to $150 online. That's a massive delta.
Yeah,
right?
It is. Yeah. And you're overcoming that physical, because I'm touching it, I'm wearing it. I know that's a good quality product, right?
That's exactly right. And so that's a big piece of it. The second big piece is, we call it the ecosystem. And I think Apple's done this really well, and I think Amazon's done this well. When you look at Amazon, the cost to leave Amazon Prime is more expensive than the cost to stay in. You lose the shipping, you lose the music, you lose the video, you lose all these feature sets. Apple, like, I have two daughters, and we are constantly on FaceTime. So even though people say Samsung probably makes a better phone or Google makes a better phone, I'm not on FaceTime. Well, guess what? My daughters are more important than that extra, derivative of technology, right? So I'm now in the Apple system, and I stay in the system. And so they built this ecosystem where it's too hard to leave. We're doing that. I think Restoration Hardware did a really good job where, for instance, you $100 a year, you join the membership program, and then you get 20% off, you get a stylist. We're going to take those features, and then we're going to announce something really cool in the next couple of, in probably the next 8 weeks, with a major player in media about doing this whole thing. And the only way you're going to get access to these events is in predominantly musical events, because music and apparel just go together so well. You think about Freedom and all those songs that it's just all apparel heavy, it's such it just goes well, is to be a member. So now, and by being a member, you get access to these certain events that no one else gets access to. You get special pricing. You're going to get 20% off. We're going to do special collections. Like at Distilled, we do a lot of stuff out of Italy. So we'll do a whole Italian collection. And if you're a member, now you get your 20% off, but you'll get special pricing. So we're going to create within all these brands this membership program where the cost to leave the membership, not pay that $100, is more expensive than the cost to stay in. And now that's our hook. And so that's how we're really thinking about the world.
Yeah, there was a time when I would have thought about that membership concept and thought, really, because I grew up in a generation where it's free because I see commercials, right? And I don't pay anything for it. But now people are being trained to pay for things that they like. You have paywalls on news services. You have companies like Patreon, where you like your creator online, you're actually subscribing and things like that. I feel like this model is becoming much more comfortable to people, and they understand the value behind it.
That's right. And I think that's the key. You got to deliver value. It has to be really strong value. So as an example, at $100 at 20% discount, if you spend $500 across our brands, and we think in 3 years we'll have 50 plus brands, $500 is pretty easy to get to, right? And you also have access to these musical events. You have special pricing on the tickets to those musical events. Imagine being able to go see the top musical artist for half the price it would cost you to go to today. That ticket alone, by the way, changes it, right? You want front row seats? Great. You spend more money at our brands. I don't care if you have a black card. I don't care if you have a platinum card. You're loyal to us. We're loyal to you. And so that's what's been lost. The retail world's moved to transaction. What's your same store sales growth? What's your sales per square foot? What's your throughput, right? We're saying, no. Let's go old school again. Let's go like when I grew up. I'm from Alabama, like small town, Auburn. I am an Alabama fan. Roll Tide. They're playing on Monday, national time game. I'm excited to see what happens there. But we get dressed up and we'd go to Atlanta and go to the malls and we'd go to Applebee's or Chili's. And that was a big effing deal, right? And that's what it used to be. Now it's just transaction, sell. So we're going to go old school, bring the customer back in, make them the center, personalized looks and styles. and say, hey, this is a contract between us, and we're going to start delivering on that contract. You become a member, you start helping us, we're going to start helping you. And we're going to give you events, and we're going to give you all these things that you would never have access to, not at a premium price, but at a discounted price because you're part of our team, our community.
And you're participating in all of these other things as well. So there's great value. I'm curious if you have a crystal ball, what is the future of fashion and retail? Are we always going to have brick and mortar? I mean, as we come out of the pandemic, what does that future look like for you if you had your ideal, or what do you think it's going to turn into?
Yeah, I think what we're going to do is going to be different than where I think it goes. I think you're going to see the department stores, they're going to have to close stores, and they're going to have to shrink their average square foot per store because the numbers just don't work. There's just not enough volume going through.
Right.
It's more like Nordstrom's now is almost 50% online. You can't support these massive stores when 50% of your volume is going through digital. So I think you're going to see the average square footage of a department store shrink and the number of stores shrink. Macy's just announced they were closing more stores. On the boutiques and the one-off, I think you're going to see that high-quality real estate matters more and more, but it's harder to make money there. So you might lose money, you might break even, but people are still going to do it because you're better off owning your own store. So I think, and then you have the boutiques. I think they'll stay, fluctuate up and down, and they're resellers, they're wholesalers, they're just boutiques instead of department stores, and they're predominantly female brands. You don't have a lot of male. Boutique Stag's a great one in male, but outside of that, it's mostly female driven. We actually think that a standalone store for a single brand doesn't work economically. So what we're going to do is almost take a boutique in our brands and create that. So we'll create what we call pods. So we might take a couple of brands, like you take Stateside, Sundry, and Distilled, and open up a store that's those three brands, and you drop them in, and that way now you're sharing the cost across the three brands. So it's a fixed cost business. And you probably have a higher average check going out the door, because the other thing we're going to do is if you walk into a store and there's just items hanging, right? How do you see a cool shirt, but how do you wear it? You see a cool bottom, how do you wear it? It's funny, when you sell into a wholesale, like if a Nordstrom's buyer, an Anthropologie buyer, or a Neiman buyer comes over, you have these walls, and then you have these racks that are a top rack and a bottom rack. And you literally build outfits for them. And that's how the buyers buy for their department stores. Why are we not doing that for the customer at the store level? That's what we're going to do. So we're actually going to create stores that aren't about, here's a small, medium, large, extra large, and here's that in blue, here's that in a print, here's that in a check, whatever. We're actually going to be, it's going to be more like, here's a top and here's the four bottoms that go with it. Or here's the bottom and here's the four tops that go with it, and help them buy, and have a lot of technology where you can scan the code and then it builds it on your phone, and you can save it to your phone. It'll build it on a big mirror on the side. That's like it almost like the Lululemon, the company mirror they bought, instead of an extra. It's just like, it shows you what that looks like. You can swipe it. It'll download to your basically online background, right? Whether you access it by mobile or you access it on your desktop. That's where we think everything goes through personalization that looks and styles, whether it's at the store level, whether it's at the digital level. So I think that's where we're really thinking about different. And same thing with catalogs. Like, catalogs are really powerful, but it could cost $500,000 to do a catalog per brand. But you do 4 brands and you show how that looks together. Well, now it's $125,000 a catalog. That now you can do 4 catalogs a year and think about the impressions and the touches and everything else. And that's how you build brand awareness. And I think that's how we think the world is, in our view, where we're taking it. And I think stores will continue to stay relevant, but I think the difference is we can make profitable stores versus break even to money losing stores because
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea that when I walk in a store, it's not just pants over here and shirts over here. And because there's no way my mind doesn't go, those all go together like this or all, right? And so it's hard to process all of that information. If you're doing that for me, I think that's amazing.
That's right. Well, it's interesting. Jay Hilburn, it was a stylist model. So we had over 2,500 stylists. And that's what we found is that the average stylist who could build outfits better sold literally 2 times more than one that didn't. So we built a builder, like a style builder that they had on their iPad, where you as a customer can say, hey, I really like that shirt. They clicked on it and it would populate into looks. And we saw the sell-through rate go through the roof because, to your point, especially guys, we don't buy with frequency,
right?
But we'll buy a lot at once, and we want to know how it looks together. And so if you can solve that for a guy, you're going to unlock a ton. And for women, they're more hunters and peckers. They might be like, hey, we've got a date night tonight, and I really want to wear these boots, or I really want to wear this bottom or this top. But if she knows she can go online and talk to her stylist and say, hey, I have this top from y'all. We got a date night, and I live in Denver, and the stylist's like, oh yeah, it's going to be 35. Wear this cute shirling that you bought, or the shirling we have, and wear this, this, and this. And she's getting 20% off because she's a member, and this is going toward her rewards, like the access to musical tickets and things like that. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think now she's going to go to Nordstrom's and buy? Not a chance.
Right. Well, and I just, watch my wife when we're ready, getting ready to go somewhere. She'll come out of the closet 8 or 9 different times with, different things, because in her mind and most of our minds, we don't really know what it's going to look like until it's on us, because we're not stylists, right? And so
That's right.
I just see that being such a benefit for her. Just, here's what you have. Here's how you can style it. I mean, that's awesome.
That's right. And we're going to build an app in time where you could literally, because we know what you own, you could scan it in your closet and it'll build it for you. That's like
awesome.
2 or 3 years down the road.
Yeah.
And then there's one more thing that's 2 or 3 years down the road is, because of my custom experience with Jay Hilburn, we're going to be able to serve. So the issue with custom is it's so much more expensive because everything's a onesie. We've actually figured out how we can keep ready to wear, like bulk pricing, where you're cutting hundreds of units at a time, but making them very specific to measurements. It's not pure custom. It's about 90% custom. And we're going to be able to do that. It'll take about 2 to 3 years because we have to build a whole measurement database, which we can do, and we know how to do it. But imagine now when you order that product, if you order it ahead of the season, so like a cashmere sweater, if you order it in July, it'll come 90% custom.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And think about that. So now it's better fitting, better quality, lower price, all going to this big, like really cool recognition rewards to the customer program.
Are we going to get to the point of 3D printing for clothes where you can just one-off, just, upload the sizes and everything and just go? Are there segments where that's happening now?
They're not now and not at scale. Do I think it will happen? Probably. The question is what's going to be the quality and what's going to be the fit. Yeah. I think there's a lot to go through. And even at scale, I think it'll probably impact more the fast fashion, because if you've ever seen, and we did a lot with the Italian, we still do with the Italians. If you look and watch how beautiful fabric or yarn is made, it's unbelievable. It costs as little as it costs, to be quite honest. So in the 3D printer is not going to be able to do that. So I think you're always going to be on more of that commodity pricing scale, but it's definitely going to happen. And the question is when. And I think you will see more stores offer it. It's like a really cool gimmick feature to come in and do something, but it's never going to. I think if you get to the middle and the high end, it's going to be harder because they can't. At least not now. It doesn't mean in 50 years from now that they can figure it out. Yeah.
I just want to, have a printer in my closet and just iterate the styles and just be good to go. Something new every day. That would be amazing. And by the way,
that could totally happen in 30, 40, 50 years for the record.
Yeah. Well, it's like the Star Trek replicator is what it is eventually, right? Where it just creates whatever you want. So I'm curious, as you look forward, your 3-year revenue goal and when you become cash flow positive based upon that, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so the good thing is, and as we announced, we'll be cash flow positive in this year, 2022.
Nice.
We expect with everything we want to line up and drive, we're hoping that we'll end up being around 175 to 200 million in revenue this year and cash flow positive meaningfully. And then as we move into next year, we'd expect that to go up to about 400, 500 million. And then the following year, probably 750 plus. And, if you put even an average multiple on that, it's a pretty significant return for shareholders. And I think that's what excites us. And the thing is, we know the acquisition pipeline. So that's not the issue. The hardest thing is acquiring companies when you're small, because there's so many rules and regulations, which I understand. It's there to protect investors and disclosures and, you're always having a significant event. As you get bigger, those acquisitions aren't significant and you just tuck them in and run. And so two things happen. The speed happens a lot faster and the cost goes way down. I mean, just between auditing and legal, we'll spend $1.5 million just on acquisitions.
Wow.
Next year, we'll spend less than half of that. And then the year after, we'll spend none of that. So you can imagine, we're not number, maybe like 250, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it would have been like 4. So it's just so expensive. I mean, think about, and by the way, we get 3 to 5 times revenue on our digital spend. So $1.5 million could have generated an extra 4.5 in revenue. And think about that extra 4.5, then the second year would have generated 15, and that 15 would have generated 60. Does that make sense? So like the opportunity cost of the dollar is really high, especially when you look out if you can keep turning that dollar for 3 or 4 years.
Well, it's fantastic. And so that's kind of your obstacles initially, the acquisitions. What other obstacles are you facing to achieve these goals?
I think it comes down to apparel companies are 2 things. I mean, we're not Elon Musk. We're not rocket science. We're not that. I mean, it's a freaking apparel, right? So it's product and it's marketing. We've got the product. I understand the supply chain. Our team understands the supply chain. We've got great designers. And now it's marketing. We've got a great marketing team, but it's putting dollars to work and spending it. So what ends up happening is the higher your revenue you go, if you're always spending 20 to 30% on marketing, the difference is when you acquire a brand, all of a sudden you acquire a brand like Sundry that's doing like 22, 23 million. Now you just dropped an extra 5 million into the marketing bucket. And then you acquire another brand that's doing that. And so all of a sudden your marketing spend is going up. That's driving brand awareness. These deals that we're talking about with a music or media partner, that all of a sudden expands. So it's brand awareness and product. So now we've got the product and we've got the brands coming. Now it's just brand awareness.
Right. And
that's just time and dollars. That's all it is. And that's what people don't understand. Like you go, how did Jetty get so big? Time and dollars, right? And the more dollars you have, the more you compress the time.
Right. Very simple.
And that's where revenue helps.
That's right. That's right. It all is that big circle, right? Well, Hil, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you. I love your passion for what you do. I mean, it's just infectious hearing you talk about your model, and I know your passion is a huge part of your success.
Well, I appreciate it. I got to say too, I mean, we have amazing employees. They care, they come in. And I think that's really critical. I think, you can't do anything without them. And I think often that it gets overlooked. And I think that's just a really big deal. So they carry the same passion. They really believe in what we're doing. And they're excited because they know if we do this, we do what Amazon did. We do what Tesla did. We do what all Apple did. And they're coming out of brands where it's just the same old, right? Time to make the donuts, you know? And now we get to do something really different. And that changes. And that gives people a sense of purpose.
Absolutely. And excitement and passion and love for what they do. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your thoughts and everything about your organization today.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Once again, I want to thank Hil for joining us and for taking the time to share with us what really makes Digital Brands Group so unique. I love his passion, and I definitely think that Digital Brands Group is one to keep your eye on. Once again, my name is Jay McFarland, and I want to thank you for joining us on this edition of Exposing the Secret.
You've been listening to Exposing the Secret, presented by Level3Trading.com. Introducing innovators, disruptors, and those intending to make a difference. It's our passion to introduce you to companies and CEOs from publicly traded companies in biotech, consumer, financial, and tech to hear how they're changing the competitive landscape. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon on Exposing the Secret.